once again, it's time for another episode of Jason's Game Room, and I welcome you all back to the show. Today, I'm going to talk about CCG tournaments, how you should prepare, what you should do, and the mindset you need going in. Now, back in the day when I was still playing multiple CCGs and checking out the occasional tournament, I noticed a vast difference between the mindset of playing with your friends, even a tournament-style game with your friends or associates is completely different than actually visiting a sanctioned tournament for any CCG. Whereas when you're playing with your friends, the stakes are very low. There's no prize at the end of the game or prize money that you're going to win. You don't have a goal you're working towards aside from just winning the game and testing your decks and such. So it's a rude awakening for a lot of players when they go straight from playing house games into a tournament with little or no preparation. Now I can tell you, because of the different CCGs that are still being played in tournament format and the types of games you will find at the tournament, there's a lot of things you need to know. And the first thing that I want to tell you is that you have to get your mindset ready first for the tournament. You can't just walk up to the tournament with your box and go, oh yeah, I'm going to play this game like I play with my buddies, and you know, this guy I'm going to play in the draw, he's probably not as good as my buddies and I'm going to win. No. The worst thing you can do is assume it's going to be the same as playing with your friends and the fact that your opponent is shit. You might find out through the first round or through the second round that maybe you're playing some weak opponents, but it does get harder. It's not a walk in the park. You can't just go in there thinking you're going to win everything like it's a house game. You have to be prepared as best as you can. And the problem with going from house games to tournament is in house games you can do whatever you want. You can bring all of your cards with you. So if you have, say, 2 1,000 card boxes and only a portion of that is your deck, between games with your friends, you can mix and match with your deck. You can do whatever you want because it's not a tournament. It's not a sanctioned event with a time limit. When you're in a tournament, you really only want to bring 2 or 3 decks with you and maybe a few extra cards, a couple handfuls of extra cards if you need to swap out something, if you're allowed. And there's also the case of if it's a sealed deck type tournament where you cannot bring your pre-constructed deck and you are given a certain amount of cards, or you bring sealed cards, say a starter and 6 boosters like it is with most games, and you have to pre-construct your deck on the spot and be ready to play. Now, an example using the Star Trek card game, when they actually came out with the sealed deck format and they came out with sealed decks that you could buy, of which I bought a few at the time, they would come with a starter, 4 boosters, I believe, and a secondary set of cards to get you started, as well as a new rule set. And if you were using these in a tournament, you could not unwrap the outer plastic on the sealed deck until you got to the table for your first round. You'd literally have to open the box there with the judges around, build the deck within a small amount of time, and start playing. So you have to be aware of what you're getting into before you go to a tournament. You know, even if you're going in with a deck of your own, if you're going into a constructed tournament where you can bring your own decks, and this is all dependent on the game, of course. I'm not going to get into the different CCGs. There are just too many rules to go over, but you have to make sure that you've spent an ample amount of time constructing your deck and putting in there what you need, because in tournament play you're not going to get a lot of time, if any, or be allowed in some cases to work on that deck and rework it between rounds. This is why for the 2 main card games that I would go to tournaments for, Magic as well as Star Trek, I'd have 2 main decks pre-constructed with everything I need, knowing that it was a tournament quality deck, and I'd have a backup deck that I could either tear apart or just use as is, because you also have to remember that there are banned lists for cards and the judges are not as forgiving as your friends. Whereas you're playing with your friends, you can use whatever you want because that's the only way you can test out your decks. I'm not saying to take the banned cards out of your deck ahead of time, like all of them, because there are ways around some of those, but at the same time, you have to be aware of the tournament you're going to. If something's come down from the sanctioning body regarding banned cards or illegal moves. This screwed me on one occasion. I went to a Star Trek CCG tournament, and in the second round, I got kicked out because I had 2 banned cards in my deck that I used at one turn because they're a combination, a very powerful combination. They had not been banned until the day before. So this tournament was on a Monday. The sanctioning body came down on the Sunday saying these 2 cards are completely banned from tournaments. They didn't tell anybody. Now, when I got to the tournament, you would think the sanctioning body and the judges would say, okay, here's a new list of banned cards, or here's some new rules that have just been adapted. We'll give you a few minutes if you have to remove this from your deck. No, unfortunately, they never did that. And the second round, the little punk kid I was playing, this is a long time ago. I was a punk kid at the same time, but this kid was a whiner, and he immediately flagged down the judge. Whereas in the first round, I had let a banned card slip on my opponent because I was having too much fun. I'm not that much of a whiner when it comes to CCGs. But anyways, long story short, I was kicked out. The deck, even without that combo, was bad enough to win the whole thing. Like, it was a damn awesome deck. And unfortunately, I couldn't get through past that because of that, and I didn't win the round. So you have to be aware of this before you go into a tournament. And this was back in the mid to late 90s. The internet was practically not there, so you couldn't go research this much on your own. And it would be in the companies like Decipher and Wizards of the Coast that did have a website operational. You know, we're talking back in the dial-up days. Never mind loading times, but content available on websites, so you couldn't just go look this up that fast. Nowadays, with high-speed internet and with the information on websites, everything is so extensive. You could go an hour before a tournament and see any kind of change in ban lists or rules. But, you know, these things happen. The other thing is the quality of opponents that you are going to be playing at these tournaments, okay? You have to realize that you're not just playing your friends. You're playing people who have your mindset or better with pre-constructed decks that they've put a lot of time into, and they're not willing to just get knocked out in the first round. It does happen. We've all been there, but at the same time, you got to be careful with that. You can't just go in thinking you're playing another bunch of friends. No, you have to go in with the killer mentality. You have to make sure you've got what it takes to get through, because that guy sitting across the table from you, or girl, is going to do whatever it takes to knock you out. So tournaments are a world upon themselves, and you also have to deal with the fact you're not just playing with 1 or 2 friends in a quiet house. You are playing at a table with another opponent, surrounded by tables with hundreds of opponents. There's a lot of background noise, a lot of talking, sometimes shouting. You have to filter out a lot of this and concentrate on the game. It is hard. I had that problem once at one of the first tournaments I went to, that I could not filter out everything. I was still pretty young and pretty new into CCGs, and it got to me. And it was a very quick exit from the tournament because everything just stressed me out, and I couldn't complete the game on a winning note. But it's a completely different mindset, and you have to be prepared for that. Now, when it comes to tournaments, I want to get into the segment which is called the highs, the lows, and the downright dirty. I didn't do this segment last week because it didn't seem appropriate with that topic, but I'm going to do it this week. The highs of tournaments are quite simple. You can make a lot of new friends. You can see a lot of cards you don't own. There's a lot of new deck types. You can become aware of so many things in the CCG realm by going to a tournament. You can learn a lot, and you can also win prize money and get some recognition for your gaming. So it grows from a passion to some actual name brand recognition if you get high enough off the ranks. The lows are obvious. Losing is not good. Nobody likes losing. Nobody likes exiting tournaments early, especially when you spent a lot of time working on that deck only to get screwed up by someone who has a better deck. And it does happen. As well as the stress involved is a big low because, as I said earlier, you're not just playing with your friends, you're playing against other like-minded opponents. So the lows get quite low when you play in tournaments. As far as the downright dirty is concerned, there really is no downright dirty when it comes to tournaments. The only thing that comes to mind is if there is some kind of overnight rule change and nobody knows about it, as I've mentioned before. That would be the only downright dirty part of tournaments, is snap rule changes. And not just in my case that I mentioned earlier, but it has happened in other tournaments where the rules have actually changed in mid-tournament. That is downright dirty. It should not be allowed to happen. Either change the rules or fix what you're doing before the tournament or wait till after. I don't think it should be allowed to affect the outcome of an entire tournament with that many people. Anyways, that's all I have to say about CCG tournaments on a whole today. Unfortunately, a lot of CCG tournaments have been canceled for the rest of the year and into next year because of current world circumstances, which I'm not getting into. I know a lot of you are probably entering some of these tournaments. I was actually going to go to Magic Fest Toronto in the fall. That's now been canceled. The Star Trek CCG 1E Nationals have been canceled. I was hoping to get an entry into that. On the plus side, there's still things like Friday Night Magic going on at comic stores, and there's like small shop tournaments which pay out next to nothing, but it's fun, and you can still play with your friends. I'm using the time to build decks and to work on older decks, reworking them so that when the tournaments do come back, I might just stay out of retirement, even though I'm getting old now, and I just turned 40 recently, so I'm a bit of an older CCG gamer, but I'm still enjoying it, and deck building in itself is a fun world. So everybody keep gaming, keep playing CCGs, video games, board games, dice games, whatever the hell you want. Just game on and have fun. Peace.